Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Ruth E. Quiroa, Associate Professor at National Louis University in Chicago, Illinois. Our panel, Not of This World, celebrates stories that transport readers beyond the ordinary, otherworldly adventures full of imagination and possibility. Our authors in this section include Matthew McElligott, the author of Project WOOFF, I'm assuming WOOF.
Woof, that's right.
And Matthew has been an author and illustrator for 30 plus years, and the acronym WOOF in his book's title stands for
Mhm.
Weaponized Operational Optimization of Flora and Fauna. And we'll see what that means in a little bit. And our next author is Tolá Okogwu, the author of Champions of the Galaxy.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for coming. Tola is an award-winning best-selling author of children's and middle grade books. Born in Nigeria and raised in London, she currently resides in Kent, England. Her science fiction title today has an international cast of protagonists committing to save the Earth from obliteration and is so relevant today. Our next author is Matthew Dow Smith, the author of the graphic novel Amelia Shadows and the New Head Ghost.
Hi.
Matthew lives on the East Coast and describes himself as a writer and comic book artist. Amelia is a pink-haired daughter of Jonathan Shadows, the most powerful dark magician of all time. And she's homeschooled by, get this, a ghost. And finally, but not least, last but not least, Jill too, the author of Rayana's Morgan's Giant Leap. I forgot to ask you, is it Rayana or Rayana?
Rayana Johnson.
Rayana, okay. And Jill too is a Caribbean American author of dystopian YA romance and middle grade novels that imagine Black girls like Rayana of Rayana's Morgan's Giant Leap in exciting new worlds and lives. She lives in Atlanta where it's warmer with her family.
True.
So welcome today. I have a lot of questions, but also if the audience has questions, they can go ahead and put them in the chat. And people are already saying hello to our panelists. So Tola, this weekend I read The Dark Fantastic by Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's been on my to-do list. I finally got to it. And she grew up attempting to find herself or even imagine herself in fantasy stories that lack protagonists of color because she wanted to experience her own magic and happily ever afters after endings. And as I was thinking about her work, it raised a few questions for me about Champions of the Galaxy. And so I've got three different ones. I'll read them. You can answer them in whatever way or not that you want. I was wondering what your experiences were reading speculative fiction growing up in London and if they were similar to Dr. Thomas's. And if these kinds of experiences influenced you as an author today, particularly as you wrote Champions of the Galaxy, it has a male protagonist, a black child of Nigerian immigrants living in the UK. And finally, um, with all those things, how did you consider or take into account your intended readers when writing this piece?
Okay, so yeah, my experiences were very similar and very much played a role in why I'm an author today. So I was born in Nigeria, moved to the UK when I was 6 years old, and I can tell you the book that made me fall in love with reading, and it was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it was a class read, and I loved that book. It absolutely blew my mind. And funnily enough, I found representation in that book, even though none of the characters are black, very British, very kind of old school, but I
Mhm.
could see in their experiences, it mirrored my experience of moving from Nigeria to the
Mhm.
UK and feeling lost and feeling helpless. It just, yeah, it really was game changing for me. And after that, I just inhaled books, moved on to Roald Dahl, Tolkien. But yes, I didn't exist in children's literature. At least that is the message that I got loud and clear by the time I became an adult. When I do school visits and stuff, and I get asked that question, how did you become an author? I often explain, it came as a direct result of not existing or feeling like I existed in children's literature. And so when I had my eldest daughter, I really wanted her to have a different experience. I wanted her to see herself in the books that she read as well as other people's. And I always describe my writing as trying to be like windows and mirrors. And because growing up, I only ever looked in windows, I wanted my writing to act as a window for some children and a mirror for others. And so, after getting fed up of not finding the books or running out of the books, I have a journalism background. And I think it was my husband who got fed up of me complaining, probably, was like, Tolá, you're right, your blog. Maybe you can do something about it. And honestly, with all the books that I'd read growing up, that was the first time it ever occurred to me that I could be a writer, that I could be an author, because it just had never seemed like a possible path up until that point. And so when I now write my books, often the characters are from a British Nigerian sort of background. And I think what that experience has taught me is representation matters, but not just for the sake of it, the quality of it also really, really matters. And so champions, not just only is Kola British Nigerian, but it's quite a diverse cast. The four children are from South Sudan, South Korea, America, and then Kola, who's British Nigerian. And so, in having such a diverse cast, it was important for me to do my research, to be as authentic as I could about those cultures, to not fall into stereotypes in writing that because I'd experienced that growing up. And I'm also very mindful that, yes, I'm British Nigerian, but we're not a monolith. And so my experience is not going to be
Right.
exactly the same as someone
Mhm.
else. I can only speak on my experiences and hope that in showing that someone learns something and is inspired or yeah. So that's how it's definitely shaped how I write the books and the characters that I write, especially champions. And then in terms of the intended reader, this was the first book that I wrote that I did not have an intended reader in mind. All my other books I did, but this one started with a hook, which I can't say because it's a massive spoiler. But that hook was what stuck with me for years and years. And then when I finally wrote it, I thought it was going to be one thing. And then in writing it, it kind of said, well, no, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be this. And I fought it and I fought it and I fought it some more until I just finally exhausted myself and went with the story. And so that was a very different experience. And it was quite freeing actually to not be preoccupied with who the reader might be, what they might take from it, but actually just what does the story want to be, and then just have fun with it.
Oh, that's beautiful. It sounds like you broke through a wall in your career. That's really neat. Thank
Mm.
you. Thank you. And Jill, as a parent, I am a white cisgender female, and yet I really, really identified with Rayana, who is a black, soon-to-be seventh grade girl in Rayana Morgan's Giant Leap. Middle school was not a good time for me, and I was so impressed with the way she overcame anxiety and the many different and sudden changes in her life, even when she lost her phone where she kept her usual lists and alarms. In the author's note, you mentioned that writing the story allowed you to revisit, and I'll quote, revisit some of the fun, nerdy adventures of your childhood and share some of the hard-won lessons learned from the more difficult memories of that time. Can you discuss that further? Um, I'm sorry, it's Rayana Johnson. I don't know why I put Morgan in here. Rayana Johnson.
No worries.
Uh,
No
I've
worries.
been
Yeah,
saying that over and over. I just had in my
no, it's confusing. Kaya Morgan is the first middle grade book that I wrote. This is about her bestie,
okay.
Rayana Johnson. So that
Okay.
didn't not out of nowhere at all.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Um,
I'm glad because I did research and I just didn't have it right.
oh no, you're fine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so to answer your question, I was definitely the responsible kid growing up, like the too responsible kid. It took me a long time, getting into adulthood before I realized that a lot of my preparedness was actually just like anxiety in disguise, right? Like thinking about all the ways something could go wrong, planning for disasters that never actually happened. Um, and just thinking that I was on top of things because I was worried all the time. And then, when I was 11, my parents announced they were getting a divorce, which actually was a disaster and came out of nowhere, right? So I couldn't have possibly prepared for it. I had no warning signs. It just totally threw me off balance. Um, I feel like middle grade is that age where you see, kids and also as protagonists in stories begin to get that peek at like what the adult world, right? Like what adults are going through, adult issues that are like often kind of hidden from younger kids. And so you're kind of let in on these adult situations and things that are kind of the more complicated side of life. And I think for Rayana, her parents' divorce really shakes her because she's like, what else don't I know? Like, what else can I not prepare for? It's the first time where she's really thrown off by something that like, is devastating to her actual world, but was not something that she could have like fixed with a checklist. And so that really kind of like is the beginning or like the core of her journey in this book. Um, as for nerdy adventures, I did go to space camp, which is where the book is set. I had a great time. I am a huge nerd. It was the coolest ever. I was on mission control for our final mission simulation. I still remember like sitting in the like mission control chair, being the like the communications expert, like translating the science talk to our like journalists, which was like our parents. But yeah, it was a great time.
Oh, that is so cool. Makes me want to reread the book because I thought it felt so real. I think we would have been friends when we were in middle school.
Yeah.
I just felt like Rayana Johnson would have been my
Mhm.
best friend.
Yeah. She's
Oh,
into it.
thank you. So now we'll move to Matthew McElligott in Project Wolf. The protagonist Alex and his setting and problem are slowly revealed as the story progresses. I had a PDF copy and I like to highlight things to where I see might be clues. It's almost as if readers are given clues that as they put these together, kind of hook into you to get you to continue reading and find out what is happening and why. And yet, as a reader, I felt like the climax and conclusion almost caught me by surprise, even though I had all this
Mhm.
clues going on. Is this the sort of book you liked to read as a child? And did the story unfold in this way while writing, or was this a purposeful plot you wrote into?
Mm. Well, this is exactly the kind of book I like to read as a kid, sort of a funny, weird adventure story. And
Hmm.
this is really me trying to emulate two of my favorite authors growing up. Two in particular, Daniel Pinkwater, who wrote and continues to write, I think, some of the funniest books ever written, and a woman named Ellen Raskin, who wrote The Weston Game and a bunch of other terrific sort of mystery puzzle books that hold up every bit as well today as when they came out. And so Project Wolf is kind of me trying my best to do what they do. The science in Project Wolf is totally ridiculous, like a Daniel Pinkwater book. There are like electric carrots. There's this network of potato plants that talk to each other through their roots called Sputnik. Um, and there's the sort of evil villain has this hypnotic musical doomsday device called a kazukini, which is sort of part kazoo and part giant oversized electrified zucchini. And there are these talking animals everywhere, and that's a huge part of the story. And that's all sort of the Daniel Pinkwater influence. Um, but even though these ideas are totally ridiculous and absurd, the idea, like in a Pinkwater story, is that to try and treat them absolutely seriously. So take these ridiculous ideas and put them in a world where everybody accepts them as a matter of fact and treats the consequences of them as if they were real. And so that part was very carefully mapped out beforehand, and I made huge like spreadsheets and all kinds of
Ah,
plans and everything to make sure everything comes together. And I got that from Ellen Raskin in her books, which are these intricate puzzles that all end with a very satisfying and conclusion and come together beautifully. What I've been struggling with is book two. I just finished the first draft of that yesterday, and um, the thing about writing a sequel is that when you write the first book, everything is possible. You're creating this world, and you can create these characters, and in this case, the characters live in this sort of off the grid community called Underland. And so I could decide what Underland looked like, and there's a river running through it, and there's uh, this house that looks like giant mushrooms and things like that, whatever. Um, but when you get to the second book, you're bound by those decisions that you made in the first book. And you were talking about that ending. And I wrote something into the ending. You read, of course, the advanced reading copy, so it's not yet the absolute final version. And I dropped a clue at the end of the book in that advanced reading copy and realized I had absolutely written myself into a corner. And no matter what I tried, I could not come up with a plausible way to solve that. And so I went for this walk. I was very frustrated on Monday, and finally, I just had this thought. I thought, well, maybe. And I emailed my editor and I said, is there any chance we can change just like 2 or 3 words in the book? And she says, well, you have till Friday. And so I was able to go in and change basically one paragraph to sort of change that world that now made everything else possible. But boy, it gets messy.
I think I know which one it is, but I won't say because you may still use that, right?
Yeah, it's actually a fairly small change. It just has to do with the timing of when something happened. But boy,
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't realize when I wrote those words, I figured, I've got time. I'll figure something out. And
Mm,
then later, a year later, you have to deal with the consequences of that. And it's
right. That's fun.
hmm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And now we'll turn to Matthew Dow Smith. I am curious about your writing process, your creative process. And so wonder, did you sketch the visual narrative first or create a script from which you created the graphic art in Amelia Shadows and the New Head Ghost? In other words, can you describe your creative processes in making this book come to reality, kind of alive? And how did the visual and the textual narratives interplay in this process?
Well, much to the horror of my editors, my long-suffering editors, I never write scripts,
Mhm.
and unless I absolutely have to, I don't write outlines. When I sit down to start a new book, I kind of have absolutely no idea where it's going to go beyond maybe the first two scenes. I'll have a character that I want to spend some time with. I'll have a setup that I think is kind of interesting, and I'll just sit down and start telling myself the story page by page, writing and laying out at the same time, which is a slightly insane way to make a comic book. Um, and as much as I'd sort of like to pretend like there's some sort of grand artistic reason for this, um, and there are some real benefits of doing it that way, in the way that the words and the pictures work together. To be honest, it's mostly kind of a practical reason, which is making a comic book is just an insane amount of work, and you need an incredible amount of emotion of motivation to sit at a table for 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And as a reader and as a massive nerd about stories, the best motivator for me as a creator is finding out what happens next. And so if I sit down and write an outline and work out all the details of the story, it sort of robs me of that. And it turns it from being play to being work. And nothing makes it harder to make a comic than actually making it work. The other benefit of it is that I'm much faster, which actually my editors do like. So
Sense that yeah, and then you're trying to kind of hurry to find out what happens next. So then you can go back
exactly.
and you must do a lot of editing instead. You know.
Actually, no, mostly just changing typos. I very rarely have to go back and change anything. I've been doing this a very long time. I've been
Yeah,
doing this
that's
more than 30
true.
years now.
That's true. That's true. And when you have your character, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Tola, the next question's for you. The themes of hope and the importance of young people to make changes that will save the world in Champions of the Galaxy were really refreshing and they were helpful, hopeful. What caused you to create a shy, nerdy, tender-hearted black male hero to pull these themes together? And how was this writing experience? Well, you described this a little bit, how it was different, but how was this different than writing from the female perspective as in some of your other titles?
Yeah, with Collar, I wanted him to be, yeah, it was definitely a decision. It's interesting because with me, I'm very plot driven as a writer. It's the bane of my editor's existence because my first draft is invariably they're doing this, they're doing that. And in my comments and notes is just, okay, Tolba, what are they thinking? What they're feeling? And I'm like, I don't know and I don't care. They're doing stuff. And so often that stuff that gets figured out as I write, that's the explorers, because I'm a big outliner. And but the outline is very much what they're doing. And so then in the doing, who they are then sort of crystallizes for me. And with Collar, he went through many different iterations until I sort of realized actually, once the theme became really clear to me, which was sort of leadership, teamwork, community, and friendship, and what those things mean to me, I realized I wanted to explore it from an angle of a leader who led from the back, if that makes sense. But my cast of characters are such big personalities. I didn't want him to lead because he had the biggest one and overpowered everybody else. I wanted him to be a leader because he listened and because he was the glue that sort of held them together and made them all work when they weren't listening to each other. And I am a nerd, and I love science and I love tech, and so that kind of came naturally. And I also think that that side of young Black boys isn't often explored in literature. And so I wanted to make space for that because, my nephews are just like that as well. And, I was very much inspired by them and watching how they move through life and wanting to sort of like get them on the page in that way. So that kind of shaped who Collar became. And in terms of gender, yeah, on Yeka, I have to be honest, it pretty semi-autobiographical. I just sort of leaned into my preteen self and went with it. So with her, it was all I had to worry about was voice and making sure it sounded like a 12-year-old. But I never had to worry about, oh, does it sound like a girl? It's like, well, this is what I went through. This is her.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
with Collar, I had to kind of like, oh, okay, does it sound like a 12-year-old? Does it sound like a boy 12-year-old? But sort of in doing that, it wasn't as different as I thought it would be or as hard as I thought it would be. Because with Collar, I had to think about how his gender might change how he sort of processed an event or an emotion. But in doing so, it kind of had me thinking about gender expectations and actually how much of the way we think and what we do is led by what we think others think we should do, which was very interesting. And I think there's a universality of experience with children that cuts across gender, self-doubt, parental angst, body autonomy. That is just, yeah, it's, and so exploring those themes meant that I kind of, that wasn't as big a deal. And I used my cousins and my nephews as beta readers just to double check and, make sure that I hadn't inadvertently got, too girly, as they said. Like, what's girly? You got him eating ice cream. He would never eat ice cream. He'd have a bag of chips. Okay. Like, but that's not necessarily true. So there were some things they give me feedback and be like, well, no, I'm going to do something different. Colin wants to eat a tub of ice cream. That's what he's going to do. So it was a really interesting exercise for me, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I do hope I get to write from a male protagonist again. So far, all my upcoming books are female again. So I will have to work on that.
Oh, thank you. And Jill, Rayana Johnson's internal dialogue pulls readers into her head in a way that makes you feel like I said before, you're her best friend. Did you have to do any conceptual work, whether drafting or using a character map or some other technique to help you figure out how to bring her to life beyond your own, sense of who you were?
Yeah, it's funny. So Rayana first came into my head in Kaya Morgan's Crowning Achievement, which is my debut middle grade. Rayana is Kaya's bestie. From the second she was on the page, she was fully formed as this like hilarious, ridiculous, like confident big dreamer and like supportive, like the most loyal best friend anybody could ask for. Readers were like in my DMs, like, when are you gonna give Rayana her own book? Like they were like, when is her book coming? And so when I finally did get the chance to do that, I really wanted to show more to who she is, right? Because the book is in first person, you really are in her head, and that internal monologue can be really strong. And so I wanted to flesh her out so that she was, big and confident, but that there's a side that not everyone gets to see from the outside, which is that inside, she tends to overanalyze things, and she's kind of always thinking about the next right move and how she's gonna come off to people, and like worried about, XYZ thing unfolding disastrously, even as she laughs it off. And so I really wanted the reader to be able to see, what Rayana says to people, and then also what she's thinking, and be able to see, how that informs her choices.
Mhm.
And then craft wise, I have two young kids, and so finding time to actually sit down and read is really hard. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And I think because of that, I tend to like literally hear my characters tell me their story. And then I just kind of like translate it to the page. So like all of Rihanna's like snarky moments and like funny like asides and jokes and stuff, like she told me those, and then I just like put them on the page. And so if she feels like she's your best friend, it's because she was my best friend first. I'm glad it translates.
Oh, oh, that's neat. That's neat. I know what you mean about listening to audiobooks. And then after that, you can't really read the book without hearing, like a sneak,
Yeah,
without hearing those voices. That's a neat way
absolutely.
to do it. Huh. Um, so I did put a note in the chat if there are any questions. Now is the time to start putting them into the webinar chat so I can ask our participants those questions. If not, I'll go on with my own. So, and we'll move to Matthew McElligott. McElligott, I said that wrong. Creating computer games is a passion of the story protagonist. This is not something all readers can do in real life, let alone write about it so clearly. Yet it is Alex's strength, one which Lily, a secondary character, reminds him of often when he needs to solve a problem. She tells him, "Well, think about it like you're designing a game, you know." How did you learn or know how to include the gaming themes and details in your story?
Well, I'm old, and I kind of grew
Really?
up with the personal computer. So back in the late 1970s, I had my first one, and back then, to use a computer, your only option was you had to learn to code. And so I grew up programming and writing games and interactive fiction and creating art on the computer through coding, and that taught me a lot. I think I'm also kind of wired that way. There's this concept in computer programming called the stack. And deep in the computer's memory, the idea is when information needs to be stored, it's put onto the stack. And then when new information is comes along, that's added to the stack. And then when information is removed, it has to be removed in the same order, top of the stack on down. And so that's how my brain works. If I'm having a conversation with somebody and we're talking about one thing and then we go off on a tangent, I have to add that to the stack. And then we go off on another tangent, I add that to the stack. And then when that conversation sort of winds back, we have to go back, removing things in the same order, or I get very kind of frustrated and cranky. And so I think a lot of my brain works the way it does from that experience of sort of growing up writing code and using the computer and solving puzzles and games. And so when I started to think about a character whose brain worked the same way, that's how I sort of landed on Alex. And he uses that sort of trait as his superpower. So he can see every challenge as a problem in a game, either a game that he's writing or a game that he's playing, and one that has to have a logical solution if he just can sort of figure it out. So that's kind of where that came from.
Makes sense. We have Megan, who's really enjoyed hearing all your different creative styles when working on a story. Um, what's something that has changed in your process since you began writing? And what's one of the harder lessons you had to learn when writing? So I'm going to throw that to you to think about. We'll come to it. And then Jill, when I get to you next, there's a specific question for you. So let me read it again and you kind of think about it while we keep going through our questions and then we'll come to it. what's something that has changed in your creative process since you began writing, and what's one of the harder lessons you had to learn when writing? So think about that for a little bit here. And we will go on to Matthew Dow Smith. The snarky humor of Amelia is spot on for the middle grade crowd. I loved it. I think this is especially true for fifth and sixth grade students. What went into your thinking as you developed your character? Is she based on someone you know or on yourself at all?
Well, there's a little bit of me in every character that I create, even the bad guys, even in a very pompous ghost like Hans in this book. But when it comes to Amelia, I have what I like to call the door test, which is you ask yourself, if this character opened a door and on the other side of the door was a giant slobbering monster, how are they going to react to that? And a normal person would slam the door shut, run, and probably scream in a very high pitched, silly voice. They did it, but I'm always going to be attracted to characters that are going to react in a more complicated way. So, for example, in the young adult series that I do, the October Girl, the main character, Autumn, she's going to open that door, see the monster, and basically go, okay, fine. I guess this is what's going to happen now. Whereas Amelia is going to open the door, stride right in, and say, you better not get any of that slobber on the carpet. And sort of once I know, once I know what their reaction to that is going to be, I already know a lot about that character. I know not just their attitude and how they carry themselves, but like I'm already starting to kind of get a sense of some possible things some possible things about their life or things that have happened in their life that are going to lead them to that moment to have that sort of reaction. And sort of once I know that, once I have a feel for that, then it's a character that you can kind of just let loose and they kind of find the story for me, which is way easier than trying to come up with the story all on my own.
Even mysteries, huh?
Yeah.
This one kind of had a little mystery in it. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. And Tola, what do you hope all your child readers and their teachers or librarians gain or experience from reading Champions of the Galaxy?
Um, I really hope that readers, when they finish the book, come away believing that their differences are superpowers. I'm a big fan of superpowers. It started with my Onyeka series, and yeah, I think everybody, every child especially, has a superpower. And I also believe that I hope they come away believing that they have the ability to make a real difference in the world, especially those shy, bookish ones that sometimes get overlooked. And for teachers and librarians, I really hope the book sparks conversation about diversity, about teamwork, especially, and that intelligence comes in many different forms and all are valuable and all have a place. And I really hope that the book plants seeds of empathy and environmental consciousness, especially, and creating spaces where children understand that working with people that are different from themselves is something that will make them stronger at the end of the day, not weaker. So yeah, it's a lot. But
No,
yeah,
but
those are
that
just
I can,
even if just
yeah,
one.
I think, yeah, in this world right now, we need that. So thank you for sharing that. And Jill, I'm going to give you the question that I asked and then the one in the chat. We have 10 minutes. So, what was your favorite section to write in Rayana Morgan's Giant Leap and why? And how is this book distinctly different from your other publications?
I got to write a laser tag chapter in Rihanna Johnson's Giant Leap, and it was the best. I love laser tag. I feel like more kids should be playing laser tag. I don't know why laser tag has like disappeared from the public dialogue, but I might have to start a petition to bring laser tag back into society.
Uh-huh.
Um, as far as how it's different, I love in between a few of the chapters, there are these interstitials of Rayana's checklists. I like live and die by my own personal checklists, and so it was really fun to put those in there to kind of see how the story is changing for her as it goes along. Definitely different from my dystopian YA novels. This is set in the real world. So yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Although sometimes it feels like its own world because it's at the camp, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the question in the chat is if Kaya and Rayana were to swap books, what Ren Fair Royale would Rayana be, and what's Kaya doing at space camp?
That is such a good question. I think Rayana is jousting for sure. Rayana is getting on a horse and putting on the appropriate protective equipment, all the, armor and stuff.
Right, right.
But she's jousting, no question. Um, and then Kaya, I think, would be in the planetarium. Kaya is my like liberal arts girly. Rihanna's my STEM girly. So Kaya's in the planetarium, looking at the stars and like thinking about constellations and all the myths that inform all those stories.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you. So I'm going to go back to that question in the chat. Something that's changed in your process that you began writing, and one of the hardest lessons you had to learn doing it. And we'll start with Matthew Dow Smith.
Oh boy, this is a tough one for me because I write and draw, and I come from sort of American superhero comics where I spent most of my career. So I'll kind of take one little thing that I hopefully will apply to other fields as well. The hardest thing for me to learn is when you're in that sort of environment, you're sort of pitching constantly. You're pitching what you think the audience wants, what you think the editor wants to see, and the hardest thing for me is in my creative process was to stop doing that, to actually start pitching the things that I thought that stop pitching the things that I thought they wanted and started pitching the things that I really wanted to do, and to learn to be okay with if they didn't see the value of that, for me to be able to say, okay, that's fine. I would rather do this on my own somewhere else. I mean, all the things that I'm doing now are all things that I did on my own for myself, and we were able to find publishers for them later.
Oh, that's great. And what about you, Matthew McElligott?
A lot of times when I do talks, one of the questions I get is people say like, how do you deal with the fact that you write something and then an editor wants to come in and maybe change something that you feel really strongly about? And I think one of the strongest lessons that I've learned over my career is what a gift it is to have somebody who is paying that close attention to your story and giving you good feedback, especially feedback that you might not want to hear. And if you're lucky enough to be getting that from your agent and from your editor and from your proofreader and from your copy editor and from the marketing people and everyone else, and if these people sincerely want the best for the book, um, there's no better gift for an author or an illustrator than to get that kind of feedback. And when you don't have it, that's when you suddenly realize how much you dearly miss it.
Right, right. Yeah, to see it as a gift rather than as a burden, I guess. Yeah, that's great. And what about you, Tola?
Um, I think going back to the fact that I'm plot driven in my stories. What I've kind of what's changed in my process is trying when I'm outlining and I'm creating that plot to incorporate the character arc more closely in rather than it being an afterthought and then having to do more on the editing side. So one of the things that I activities that I do is map out. So I start, even if it's okay, I might know the beginning of the story, I don't know the end of the flip. I'm like, okay, who is my character at least at the beginning, or who are they at the end of the story? And then once I know that, then my plot more becomes about what am I going to throw at them that's going to bring about whatever change it is that I am trying to see in the character. Although that was interesting for Collar because he doesn't really have a character change. He was a somewhat flat character arc. And so that completely upended my process a little bit, which was fun. But that has helped me greatly in the editing side. And it just makes the stories richer and stronger in writing them. And then also, I'm also a perfectionist. So also reminding myself that it does not have to be perfect. Because I'll sit there for hours trying to find the perfect word and it's not coming. So I do now zero drafts where I just put it all out there and then go from there.
Well, we are at time. There was one last question in the chat we won't get to. I'm sorry, Celeste, about the differences in the UK market and the US market. Um,
I love the jazz hands. That is going to do it for us, folks. Thank you for hanging in there with us. And I hope you all enjoyed middle grade magic with us. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.